Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Perfect Illusions. Rod Gilmore stood in his sprawling kitchen, watching his wife Charlene arrange the last of the decorations for his 52nd birthday party. The granite countertops gleamed under the warm lighting, reflecting the careful attention to detail that had always marked their home. 28 years of marriage had built this, a fortress of suburban perfection in Cedar Grove's most exclusive neighborhood. "Everything looks perfect, honey," Rod said, adjusting his tie. The mirror reflection showed a man who'd maintained his military bearing even 15 years after leaving the service. Colonel Rod Gilmore had commanded respect in the battlefield, and CEO Rod Gilmore commanded respect in the boardroom. His security consulting firm, Tactical Solutions Incorporated, employed over 200 people and held contracts with half the Fortune 500. Rod's background was forged in fire. Born to a working-class family in Detroit, he'd clawed his way through West Point on merit scholarships and sheer determination. 20 years of military service had taught him that survival required constant vigilance, absolute loyalty, and the willingness to destroy anyone who threatened what you'd built. He'd learned early that mercy was a luxury that got good soldiers killed. Charlene smiled, the same radiant smile that had captured his heart during his final deployment. She'd waited for him through 2 tours, raised their children Tyler and Brittany while he served his country. Now, at 48, she still turned heads with her auburn hair and emerald eyes. What Rod didn't know was that Charlene had grown tired of being a military wife, tired of his rigid discipline, tired of playing second fiddle to his career and his code of honor. "Only the best for my war hero," she said, placing a gentle kiss on his cheek. "Wade should be here soon with the others." Rod nodded, thinking of his closest friend Wade Stokes, his former sergeant who now served as his company's head of operations. Wade had been his right hand through everything, the transition to civilian life, building the business, even helping him through his father's death 2 years ago. What Rod didn't realize was that Wade had been growing concerned about his friend's increasingly ruthless business practices and rigid worldview. The doorbell chimed, and Tyler bounded down the stairs. At 26, their son had inherited Rod's sharp jawline and Charlene's green eyes. Fresh from law school, he'd recently joined a prestigious firm in downtown Seattle. Tyler had always resented his father's demanding nature, the impossibly high standards, the way Rod treated family life like a military operation. "Dad, that's probably Uncle Wade," Tyler said, straightening his blazer. "Mom, should I get the door?" "Please, sweetheart," Charlene replied, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. Soon the house filled with familiar voices. Wade brought his wife Linda, Rod's sister Gloria Ellison arrived with her husband Cameron, and even Blake Parsons, the family attorney, made an appearance. The conversations flowed easily, business successes, family updates, shared memories from Rod's military days. Brittany, their 24-year-old daughter, emerged from upstairs wearing a black cocktail dress that made her look older than her years. She worked as a marketing coordinator for a tech startup, though Rod often criticized her lack of focus and ambition. Like her brother, she'd grown tired of constantly disappointing their demanding father. "Happy birthday, Daddy," she said, embracing him warmly. "We have such a wonderful evening planned." The dinner conversation centered around Rod's achievements. His latest contract with the Department of Defense had been his biggest yet, a 5-year deal worth $40 million. Wade raised his glass for a toast. "To Rod Gilmore," Wade announced, "a man who's never forgotten where he came from or the people who matter most." Everyone drank, but Rod noticed something strange. Quick glances between Charlene and Tyler. A nervous fidget from Brittany. Blake seemed unusually quiet, barely touching his wine. Even Wade seemed tense. "This means everything to me," Rod said, looking around the table. "Having all of you here, seeing what we've built together as a family. I know I've been demanding over the years, maybe too focused on work, but everything I've done has been for this, for us." The room fell silent. Charlene reached over and squeezed his hand, but her smile seemed forced. After dinner, as Gloria helped clear the dishes, she pulled Rod aside in the kitchen. "You seem happy tonight," she said, her voice carrying an odd tone. "I am. Why wouldn't I be? Beautiful family, successful business, good friends. What more could a man want?" Gloria's expression darkened slightly. "Rod, there's something." "Mom," Tyler interrupted, appearing in the doorway. Could you come here for a second? Brittany, and I need to talk to Dad. Gloria nodded quickly, almost relieved to be interrupted. Of course. Rod, we'll talk later. Rod watched his sister leave, puzzled by her behavior. The evening had been perfect, yet something felt off. He'd learned to trust his instincts during 20 years of military service. They'd kept him alive through 2 combat deployments and countless dangerous situations. As the other guests mingled in the living room, Rod found himself alone with his thoughts. He walked to the window overlooking their backyard, where he'd taught Tyler to throw a football and watch Brittany take her first steps. This house represented everything he'd fought for, everything he'd built through discipline, sacrifice, and unwavering determination. His reflection in the window showed a man who'd aged well, kept himself in fighting shape despite the desk job. The scar above his left eyebrow, courtesy of an IED blast in Afghanistan, reminded him daily that survival required vigilance. That scar had taught him a valuable lesson. Trust the wrong people, and you get hurt. The soldiers who died under his command had trusted him to keep them safe. Rod had never forgotten that responsibility. Dad, Brittany's voice made him turn. Tyler stood beside his sister in the doorway, both wearing expressions Rod couldn't quite read. The living room behind them had grown quiet. Rod noticed that the other guests had strategically disappeared, leaving only family. What is it? Rod asked, his military training automatically cataloging their body language. Defensive postures. Avoiding eye contact. Nervous energy. Rod's instincts sharpened. In the field, this was the moment before an ambush. In business, it was the setup before a hostile takeover. In family life, he wasn't sure what it meant, but every fiber of his being screamed danger. We need to talk to you, Tyler said, his voice steady but lacking its usual confidence. Rod's mind immediately began analyzing possible scenarios. Financial problems? Legal issues? Someone in trouble? His military training had taught him to always prepare for the worst-case scenario. Talk about what? He asked, maintaining his calm exterior while his mind began running threat assessments. Brittany glanced at Tyler, who nodded encouragingly. Rod noticed they'd rehearsed this moment. Dad, we have news, she said softly. The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Rod felt that familiar sensation from combat. Time slowing down, senses heightening, the world suddenly becoming sharper and more dangerous. What kind of news? He asked, though part of him already dreaded the answer. Tyler stepped forward, his lawyer training evident in his measured tone. Dad, you should sit down first. Rod's entire body went on high alert. In 20 years of military service, people only told you to sit down before delivering news that would knock you over. Someone was dead, someone was injured, or someone had betrayed you so completely that standing would become impossible. I'll stand, he said firmly, his voice carrying the authority that had once commanded soldiers under fire. Tell me what's going on. Chapter 2. The Foundation Cracks. Rod Gilmore didn't sit down. 20 years of military command had taught him that sitting made you vulnerable, and right now, every instinct screamed danger. He remained standing by the window, his posture straight and alert, like a soldier awaiting enemy contact. I'll stand, he said firmly. Tell me what's going on. The living room had emptied except for family. Wade, Gloria, Blake, and the other guests had mysteriously vanished, leaving only Rod, Charlene, Tyler, and Brittany. The silence stretched like a wire under tension. Tyler exchanged another look with his sister, then took a deep breath. Dad, this is difficult to explain. Try me, Rod said, his voice carrying the edge that had once commanded soldiers under fire. Brittany stepped closer, her green eyes, so much like her mother's, filled with something Rod was beginning to recognize as pity. That realization sent ice through his veins. Dad, we have to tell you something about tonight, she began. About this party, about everything. Rod's gaze shifted to Charlene, who stood frozen near the dining room entrance. Her face had gone pale, and she wouldn't meet his eyes. In that moment, Rod saw the truth reflected in her guilty expression. Charlene. Rod's voice cut through the silence like a blade. What's going on? His wife flinched at the tone, the same voice he'd used on subordinates who'd screwed up badly enough to endanger lives. Rod, please, she whispered. Let them explain. Someone better start explaining, Rod said, his patience evaporating. Now. Tyler cleared his throat, falling back on his legal training. Dad, for the past few months, we've been concerned about your perception of certain situations. My perception? Rod's voice dropped to the dangerous quiet that had preceded several enemy interrogations. Be specific. Brittany moved to stand beside her brother, drawing strength from his presence. Dad, you really believe that this party was for you? That it was about celebrating your birthday? The words hit Rod like shrapnel. What do you mean I believed it was for me? It is my birthday. Yes, Tyler said carefully. But the real purpose of the party was... He paused, gathering courage for what came next. Rod's mind was already assembling pieces he'd been unconsciously collecting for months. The real purpose was to gather everyone here so we could finally tell you the truth. About Mom. About what's been happening for the past 3 years. Rod felt the world shift beneath his feet, the same disorienting sensation he'd experienced when his convoy hit that IED in Kandahar. But this was worse. This was happening in his own home, delivered by his own children. What truth? He asked, though his military mind was already assembling the evidence he'd been unconsciously collecting for months. Charlene's late nights at the book club. Her new exercise routine that required leaving the house at odd hours. The way she'd become protective of her phone, taking it everywhere, even to the bathroom. The credit card charges he'd noticed but dismissed. Expensive dinners at restaurants they'd never been to together. Hotel stays when she'd claimed to be visiting her sister. Mom's been having an affair, Brittany said, the words tumbling out in a rush. For 3 years. With Jack Denton. Jack Denton. Rod knew the name. Charlene's old college boyfriend who'd reconnected with her on social media 2 years ago. The one she'd insisted was just an old friend when Rod had questioned the frequency of their messages. The same Jack who'd supposedly gone through a difficult divorce and needed someone to talk to. We've been trying to figure out how to tell you, Tyler continued. We thought if we got everyone together, people you trust, maybe it would be easier. Rod's mind went cold and calculating, the same mental state that had kept him alive through dozens of combat missions. His emotions shut down, replaced by tactical thinking. The pieces fell into place like a perfectly executed battle plan. All the signs he'd dismissed, all the excuses he'd accepted, all the lies he'd believed. How long have you known? He asked. I found out 8 months ago, Tyler admitted. Brittany's known for 6 months. How? Brittany looked sick. I saw them together at the Fairmont Hotel. I was there for a work conference, and they were in the lobby, kissing. They didn't see me, but I took pictures. And you waited 8 months to tell me. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation delivered with military precision. Dad, we were trying to protect you, Tyler said. We hoped maybe she'd end it, or protect me. Rod's voice could have frozen lava. By letting me continue living a lie while my wife screws another man? That's protection? Charlene finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Rod, please. It's not what you think. Rod turned to face her fully for the first time since the revelation began. When he looked at her now, he saw a stranger. The woman he'd loved for 28 years, the one he'd built his entire civilian life around, had vanished. In her place stood an enemy who'd been living in his house, eating his food, sleeping in his bed, and plotting against him. Not what I think, he repeated. So you haven't been sleeping with Jack Denton for 3 years? You haven't been lying to my face every single day? You haven't been using our marriage as a cover while you live a double life? It's complicated, Charlene said, tears beginning to form. No, Rod said with deadly calm. It's simple. You made a choice. Every day for 3 years, you chose to betray me. To betray our marriage vows. To make me look like a fool in front of our children, our friends, our community. He turned back to Tyler and Brittany. And you two chose to be accomplices. To watch me plan tonight's party. Watch me talk about how proud I was of our family, and say nothing. Dad, we were trying to find the right time, Brittany pleaded. The right time was 8 months ago. The right time was 6 months ago. The right time was any of the 100 opportunities you've had since then. Rod walked to the window again, staring out at the life he'd thought he was building. Everything felt different now, tainted, hollow, built on lies. He thought about all the military families he'd known, the marriages destroyed by infidelity and betrayal. He'd always believed his family was different, stronger, built on a foundation of trust and loyalty. Where is he now? Rod asked without turning around. Silence. I asked where Jack Denton is now. He's here, Tyler said reluctantly. Rod spun around. Here? In my house. He's outside, Charlene said quickly. He wanted to be here when we told you. To explain, to apologize. He wanted to be here. Rod's laugh held no humor. The man who's been screwing my wife for 3 years wanted to be at my birthday party to watch me get humiliated. How thoughtful. Rod walked toward the front door, his movements controlled but predatory. 20 years of combat training had taught him exactly how to hurt people, how to break them efficiently and permanently. More importantly, it had taught him how to identify enemies and eliminate threats. Dad, don't, Tyler called out, recognizing the look in his father's eyes. Don't what? Rod asked, pausing with his hand on the doorknob. Don't defend my family's honor? Don't protect what's mine? Don't respond like a man when another man steals from me. Rod, please, Charlene sobbed. Let's just talk about this. Rod looked at her one final time, memorizing every detail of her face. He wanted to remember exactly what betrayal looked like when he was planning his revenge. We're done talking, Charlene. We've been done for 3 years. I just didn't know it. He opened the door and stepped outside, where Jack Denton waited in the shadows of the front porch like the coward he was. Chapter 3, The Enemy Revealed. Jack Denton stood in the shadows of Rod's front porch like a man waiting for execution. At 45, he'd maintained the lean build of his college years, though his dark hair now showed silver at the temples. He wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month, the uniform of a successful pharmaceutical sales director. Rod stepped outside and closed the door behind him, sealing off his family's voices. The October evening air bit at his skin, but he felt nothing. His mind had shifted into that cold, analytical state that had served him well in combat zones. Hello, Rod, Jack said, his voice carefully neutral. I know this is. Shut up, Rod said quietly. Jack's mouth snapped closed. He'd probably expected anger, shouting, maybe even violence. But Rod's calm was infinitely more dangerous. 3 years, Rod said, studying the man who'd been systematically destroying his life. 3 years you've been in my house, eating my food, shaking my hand, pretending to be my friend while you fucked my wife. Jack flinched at the crude language. Rod, I never meant for it to happen this way. How did you mean for it to happen? Walk me through your plan. There was no plan. It just developed. Rod circled Jack slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. His military training cataloged every detail. Jack's nervous breathing, the way he favored his left foot, the expensive watch that suggested financial success, the soft hands that had never seen combat or real work. It developed. I see. So one day you accidentally stuck your dick in my wife, and then you accidentally kept doing it for 3 years. You don't understand the situation, Jack said, finding some courage. Your marriage was already failing. Charlene was lonely, neglected. You were always working, always focused on business. So you saw an opportunity. I saw a woman who needed someone to care about her. Rod stopped circling, and the caring involved hotel rooms, expensive dinners, weekend trips while I thought she was visiting her sister. Jack's silence confirmed everything. Tell me something, Jack. Did you plan this birthday party together? Did you and my wife and my children sit around discussing how to reveal your little affair? Did you laugh about how clueless I was? It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. Jack straightened, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. Your kids found out. They were going to tell you anyway. We thought it would be better if everyone was here, if you had support. Support. Rod's laugh was like breaking glass. You thought I'd need support when I learned that my entire family had been lying to me for months. How considerate. Rod, I know you're angry. I'm not angry, Jack. I'm cold. There's a difference. The front door opened, and Tyler emerged, followed by Brittany and Charlene. Rod didn't turn around, keeping his focus on Jack. Dad, please come inside, Tyler said. We need to discuss this rationally. Rationally, Rod repeated. My son wants me to be rational about discovering that my wife, my children, and my wife's lover have been conspiring against me for months. That's interesting. Charlene stepped forward, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Rod, I know I've hurt you. I know I've made terrible mistakes. But we can work through this. Now Rod did turn around. When Charlene saw his face, she stepped back involuntarily. Work through this, he said. You want to work through 3 years of adultery, lies, and betrayal. You want me to forgive and forget while you decide whether you want to keep me or trade up to your college boyfriend. That's not what I want, she protested. What do you want, Charlene? Because it seems to me you've already made your choice. You chose Jack over me every day for 3 years. Jack stepped forward, trying to insert himself into the conversation. Rod, if you want to blame someone, blame me. I pursued her. I convinced her. Don't. Rod's attention snapped back to Jack with laser focus. Don't you dare try to protect her honor now. She made her choices. Every single day for 3 years, she chose to lie to me. She chose to betray our marriage vows. She chose to humiliate me in front of our community. Those were her choices. Dad, Brittany said softly, people make mistakes. Maybe with counseling, with time. Rod looked at his daughter, his little girl who used to climb on his lap and tell him about her day at school. Now she stood there suggesting he should forgive the woman who destroyed their family. Mistakes, he said. You think 3 years of calculated betrayal is a mistake. You think lying to my face every day is a mistake. You think conspiring with my enemies is a mistake. Dad, please. I said no. Rod's voice carried the absolute authority that had once commanded 200 soldiers. There are no mistakes here. There are only choices and consequences. Charlene sobbed openly now. Rod, please. I'll do anything. I'll end it with Jack. I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever you want. What I want, Rod said, looking directly at her, is for the last 3 years to have never happened. Can you give me that, Charlene? Can you give me back the time I wasted loving a woman who didn't exist? Can you undo the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation? I can't change the past, she whispered. Then we have nothing to discuss. Rod turned to Jack. I want you off my property. Now, if I see you anywhere near my family again, I will consider it a hostile act. Jack straightened, some of his earlier fear replaced by defiance. You can't control what Charlene does anymore, Rod. She's made her choice. Has she? Rod asked, his tone almost conversational. Charlene, have you made your choice? His wife looked between him and Jack, confusion and panic warring in her expression. Because here's what I think, Rod continued. I think you've been playing both sides. Keeping your comfortable marriage for security while getting your excitement from Jack. But now you have to choose. You can't have both anymore. Rod, I choose. Right now? Marriage or affair? Security or excitement? Me or him? The silence stretched endlessly. Rod watched his wife's face, seeing the calculation behind her tears. 28 years of marriage, and he was finally seeing who she really was. I can't choose right now, she finally said. I need time to think. Rod nodded slowly. That's what I thought. He looked at Tyler and Brittany. You two have also made your choices. You chose to protect her secret instead of protecting your father. You chose to participate in my humiliation instead of preventing it. Those are choices you'll have to live with. Dad, we were trying to do the right thing, Brittany pleaded. The right thing would have been loyalty. The right thing would have been honesty. The right thing would have been telling me the truth 8 months ago, instead of watching me plan a birthday party to celebrate a life that didn't exist. Rod walked past all of them toward the front door. I'm going inside to pack. I'll be staying elsewhere while I decide how to proceed. When I'm gone, you can all continue your little conspiracy without me. Rod, wait, Charlene called out. He paused at the door, but didn't turn around. Where will you go? That's no longer your concern, he said, and disappeared into the house. As he climbed the stairs to their bedroom, his former bedroom, Rod's mind was already working. He'd spent 20 years learning how to identify enemies, analyze their weaknesses, and neutralize threats. Tonight, he'd learned that his enemies lived in his own house. But enemies could be defeated. It just required the right strategy, the right resources, and the willingness to do whatever was necessary to win. Rod Gilmore had never lost a war. He didn't intend to start now. And unlike previous conflicts, this war would be personal. This war would be total. This war would leave no enemies standing. Chapter 4, Reconnaissance and Assessment. Rod spent his first night away from home at the Marriott downtown, but by morning he'd relocated to a furnished apartment complex 20 minutes from his house. The 2-bedroom unit was sparse, functional, exactly what he needed for operational planning. He sat at the small dining table with his laptop, 3 cell phones, and a yellow legal pad covered in notes. Across from him sat Wade Stokes, the only person Rod trusted completely, or thought he could trust. 36 hours, Wade said. reviewing the timeline Rod had constructed. That's how long it took you to gather all this intelligence on Jack Denton. Old habits, Rod replied, scrolling through financial records on his screen. Jack's been busy. Pharmaceutical sales director for Morrison Labs, pulling down $250 a year base plus commissions. Divorced twice, both times for infidelity. Currently carries about $40,000 in credit card debt despite his income. Wade studied the photographs Rod had printed, surveillance shots of Jack's apartment building, his office, his regular haunts. You've been thorough. I've been motivated. Rod pointed to another set of documents. Morrison Labs is one of our clients. Small contract, but it gives me access to their employee database. Jack's been padding his expense reports for 2 years. Dinners with clients who don't exist. Travel to cities where Morrison has no business. How much? About $15,000 over 2 years. Not enough to get him fired, but enough to damage his reputation if it becomes public. Wade whistled low. You're going to expose him for fraud. That's just the beginning. Rod pulled up bank records on his second phone. Charlene's been transferring money from our joint account to a separate account I didn't know about. Small amounts, nothing I'd notice individually. But over 3 years, it adds up to about $22,000. What's she doing with it? Funding their affair. Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, weekend trips. She's been using my money to pay for her betrayal. Wade leaned back in his chair. So she's been stealing from you to finance her affair with a man who's stealing from his company. Poetry in motion. Rod's voice carried no emotion. But that's just the financial side. The real intelligence is psychological. He opened a different folder. I've been thinking about the birthday party setup. The coordination required, the timing, the way everyone disappeared when Tyler and Brittany made their announcement. You think more people knew? I know more people knew. Rod pulled up phone records. Look at these call patterns. 3 weeks ago, Charlene made calls to my sister Gloria, to Blake Parsons, to your wife Linda. Wade, did Linda know? Wade shifted uncomfortably. Linda mentioned that Charlene seemed troubled lately. Said she was worried about your marriage. I didn't think much of it. Everyone knew except me. Rod's fingers drummed against the table. My own sister, my family attorney, my best friend's wife. They all knew I was being humiliated, and they all chose to keep quiet. Rod, maybe they thought. They thought what? That I was too weak to handle the truth? That I needed to be protected from reality? That my feelings mattered less than keeping Charlene's secret? Wade had no answer for that. Rod stood and walked to the apartment's small window overlooking the parking lot. 20 years in the military, Wade. 20 years of understanding that intelligence wins wars. And I was living with the enemy while my own family fed them information. What are you planning? Rod turned back to the table. Phase 1 is complete. I've identified all the players, mapped their relationships, analyzed their vulnerabilities. Phase 2 begins today, which is economic warfare. Rod sat back down and opened his laptop to a legal document. I've been reviewing our assets. The house is in both our names, but I made the down payment from my military savings. The business is mine. I founded it, built it, and Charlene has no legal claim. Our joint accounts contain money that's primarily from my income over the past 15 years. You're going to cut her off. I'm going to protect what's mine. Rod pulled up another document. I've already moved the business accounts to a new bank. By noon today, our joint personal accounts will be frozen pending legal review. Charlene's credit cards, which are extensions of my accounts, will be canceled. That's going to cause problems. Good. Problems create pressure. Pressure reveals character. Rod's smile was predatory. Let's see how much Jack loves Charlene when she can't afford to help fund his lifestyle anymore. Wade studied his friend's face. This isn't just about money, is it? No. It's about control. Rod's eyes were cold steel. For 3 years, I've been dancing to a tune I couldn't hear. My wife, my children, my extended family, they've all been manipulating me, controlling information, managing my reality. That ends now. Rod's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and smiled, an expression devoid of warmth. What is it? Blake Parsons wants to meet. Apparently, Charlene called him this morning when her credit card stopped working. Are you going to see him? Oh yes. Blake's going to be very helpful with Phase 3, which is... Rod closed his laptop and stood. Blake Parsons has been our family attorney for 12 years. He's handled our wills, our business contracts, our real estate transactions. He knows every detail of our financial life. And he kept my wife's affair secret while continuing to take my money for legal services. That's a conflict of interest. Possibly grounds for disbarment. Wade's eyes widened. You're going after his law license. I'm going to destroy his career. Rod's voice was matter of fact. Blake chose sides. He chose to protect Charlene instead of his client, me. Actions have consequences. Rod, think about this. Blake's got a family, kids in college. If you destroy his career, he should have thought about that before betraying my trust. Rod picked up his car keys. Everyone who participated in this conspiracy is going to pay a price. Blake, Gloria, Linda, Tyler, Brittany, all of them. What about your kids? They're your blood. Rod paused at the door. Blood means nothing without loyalty. My children chose to protect my wife's affair instead of their father's honor. They're adults now. They can live with adult consequences. What kind of consequences? Tyler's up for a promotion at his law firm. Senior associate track, very competitive. I wonder how his partners will react when they learn he's been complicit in fraud and conspiracy. Wade stared at his friend. You're going to destroy your son's career? Tyler destroyed his own career when he chose to betray his father. Rod's voice carried absolute conviction. And Brittany's tech startup is looking for series of funding. I wonder how many investors will be interested when they learn that the marketing coordinator can't be trusted to tell the truth about her own family. Rod, this is insane. You're talking about destroying your entire family. My family destroyed themselves when they chose betrayal over loyalty. Rod opened the door. I'll be back this evening. Phase 4 requires specialized equipment and personnel. What's Phase 4? Rod paused and looked back at Wade. Phase 4 is when Jack Denton learns the difference between thinking he's won and actually surviving. After Rod left, Wade sat alone in the apartment, staring at the intelligence files scattered across the table. He'd served under Rod Gilmore for 8 years in the military and worked with him for 7 years in business. He'd seen Rod plan and execute operations that seemed impossible, had watched him systematically destroy enemy positions with the patience of a chess master. But this was different. This was personal. And Wade knew from experience that Rod Gilmore never forgot an enemy, never forgave a betrayal, and never stopped until he'd achieved total victory. Wade also knew that Rod was heading down a path that would destroy everyone around him, including Rod himself. For the first time in 15 years of friendship, Wade began to wonder if he was going to have to choose between loyalty to Rod and doing what was right. Chapter 5. Allies and Assets. Blake Parsons arrived at Rod's temporary office looking like a man facing his own execution. The family attorney's usually immaculate appearance showed signs of strain. Wrinkled shirt, loosened tie, the beginning of stress sweat despite the cool October morning. Rod sat behind a borrowed desk in the conference room of a client's office building, his posture military straight and his expression unreadable. He didn't offer Blake a seat. You wanted to meet, Rod said simply. Blake cleared his throat. Rod, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Charlene called me this morning about some financial issues. No misunderstanding. I froze our joint accounts and canceled her credit cards. I've also instructed my bank to review all transactions from the past 3 years for any irregularities. Rod, you can't just. I can do whatever I want with my money, Blake. The question is whether you're going to help me protect my assets or continue helping my wife steal them. Blake's face went pale. That's not fair. I never helped anyone steal anything. Rod opened a file folder on the desk. Let's review. 8 months ago, you helped Charlene set up a separate bank account that I knew nothing about. You told me it was for household management purposes. Was that true? Well, technically. Yes or no, Blake? The account was legitimate. Charlene said she wanted more independence in managing certain expenses, such as funding her affair with Jack Denton. Blake shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't aware of the specific uses, but you were aware of the affair. It wasn't a question. Rod's tone made it clear that denial would be pointless. Charlene mentioned that she was going through some personal difficulties, Blake admitted. Personal difficulties. That's what we're calling adultery now. Rod leaned forward. Blake, you've been my attorney for 12 years. You've handled my business contracts, my estate planning, my family's legal needs. I've paid you over $200,000 during that time. Rod, please. While taking my money, you've been helping my wife hide assets and keeping her affair secret. Do you see the conflict of interest? Blake was sweating openly now. I was trying to protect everyone involved. Sometimes in family situations, discretion is. Discretion? Rod's voice could have cut glass. You mean helping my wife commit adultery while taking my money to provide legal services is discretion? That's not how it was. Rod stood slowly, his movements controlled and predatory. Here's how it was, Blake. You made a choice to side with my wife against me. You chose to help her hide money that she was using to fund an affair. You chose to keep secrets that directly harmed your primary client, me. Rod, I never meant. I don't care what you meant. I care what you did. Rod picked up a document from the desk. This is a complaint I'm filing with the State Bar Association. Conflict of interest, breach of fiduciary duty, failure to represent your client's interests. Blake's face went white. Rod, please. If you file that complaint, it could ruin my career. I have partners, employees, clients who depend on me. You should have thought about that before you chose to betray my trust. There has to be another way. Some arrangement we can work out. Rod studied Blake for a long moment, like a general deciding whether to accept an enemy's surrender. Maybe, he said finally. Sit down. Blake practically collapsed into the chair across from Rod's desk. Here's what's going to happen, Rod continued. You're going to help me protect my assets during the divorce proceedings. You're going to provide me with every piece of information you have about Charlene's financial activities. And you're going to do both of those things while charging me your lowest possible rate. Of course, whatever you need. I'm not finished. Rod's voice remained dangerously calm. You're also going to help me understand exactly how much my family knew about this affair and when they knew it. Every conversation, every hint, every piece of information that came your way. Rod, I can't violate attorney-client privilege. Charlene waived privilege when she used you to facilitate fraud. And since I'm also your client, and my interests were harmed by your actions, you have an obligation to help me understand the full scope of the damage. Blake nodded reluctantly. What else? Jack Denton works for Morrison Labs, which is one of our clients. I want to know everything about his employment history, his financial situation, and his business practices. Can you arrange to review his personnel file? That might be possible. Morrison's HR director owes me some favors. Good. I also need you to research the legal implications of what I've discovered about his expense account fraud. You think he's stealing from Morrison? I know he's stealing from Morrison. The question is whether we can prove it in a way that will hold up in court. Blake pulled out his phone and began taking notes. What's your timeline? I want preliminary information by tomorrow. Complete files by the end of the week. That's ambitious. Blake, let me be very clear about something. Right now, you have two choices. You can help me destroy the people who betrayed me, or you can join them in being destroyed. Those are your only options. Blake looked up from his phone. Rod, I know you're angry, but maybe some perspective. Perspective. Rod's laugh was like breaking glass. My wife spent 3 years lying to me while using my money to fund her affair. My children knew about it for months and said nothing. My sister, my friends, my attorney. All of you knew I was being humiliated and chose to keep quiet. That's the perspective. We were trying to protect you. By letting me continue loving a woman who was betraying me every day, by letting me plan birthday parties and anniversary celebrations for a marriage that had been dead for 3 years, that's protection? Blake had no answer. Rod sat back down. Here's what I've learned, Blake. In war, you can't defeat an enemy you refuse to identify. For 3 years, I didn't know I was at war. Now I do. What does that mean? It means I'm going to use every resource, every skill, every connection I've developed over the past 30 years to destroy the people who betrayed me. Starting with Jack Denton. Blake's pen had stopped moving. Rod, what are you planning? I'm planning to win. Rod picked up another file. Jack thinks he's taken something from me. But you can't steal something from someone who's willing to destroy you to get it back. And Charlene. Rod's expression went completely cold. Charlene made her choice. She chose another man over her husband, chose lies over truth, chose betrayal over loyalty. Now she gets to live with the consequences. What about Tyler and Brittany? My children chose to protect their mother's affair instead of their father's honor. They chose to participate in my humiliation instead of preventing it. They're adults now, Blake. Adults who made adult choices. They can live with adult consequences. Blake finished writing and looked up. Rod, I know this is painful, but families can recover from affairs. With counseling, with time. Blake, Rod interrupted. Let me explain something to you. In the military, when someone betrays their unit, they don't get counseling. They get court-martialed. When someone steals from their fellow soldiers, they don't get a second chance. They get destroyed. But this is family. No, Rod said quietly. Family is people who are loyal to each other. Family is people who protect each other. Family is people who tell each other the truth. What I had was a group of people living in my house, spending my money, and lying to my face. Rod stood again, signaling the end of the meeting. You have 48 hours to get me the information I need, Blake. After that, I moved to Phase 4 with or without your help. What's Phase 4? Rod's smile was the most terrifying thing Blake had ever seen. Phase 4 is when everyone who betrayed me learns that Rod Gilmore never forgives and never forgets. Chapter 6. The trap is set. Rod's apartment had transformed into a command center. Maps of the city covered one wall, marked with locations and movement patterns. 3 laptops displayed financial records, personnel files, and surveillance footage. A professional-grade camera with a telephoto lens sat on the table next to printed photographs and typed surveillance reports. Russell Mansfield, the private investigator Rod had hired, arrived at precisely 6 p.m. carrying a briefcase full of equipment and a grim expression. Everything's in place, Russell said, setting up his laptop. Surveillance equipment in Jack's apartment, monitoring devices on his phone and computer, tracking software on his car. We can monitor his every move. And Charlene. She's been staying at the Hampton Inn downtown since you froze the accounts. She's meeting with Jack tonight at 7:30 to discuss their situation. Rod studied the surveillance photographs Russell had taken. She looks desperate. She should be. Without access to your money, she can't maintain her lifestyle. Jack can't afford to support her on his salary, especially with his debt load. Perfect. Desperate people make mistakes. Russell pulled up audio files on his laptop. We've intercepted several phone conversations between them. Want to hear the highlights? Rod nodded. Russell played a recording from earlier that day. Charlene's voice was stressed, almost panicked. Jack, I don't know what to do. He's frozen everything. I can't even buy groceries. Jack's response was telling. Maybe this is a sign, Charlene. Maybe we should cool things off until the heat dies down. Cool things off. Jack, I thought we were going to be together. I thought you loved me. I do love you. But I can't afford to support both of us. And if Rod's serious about exposing everything, my career could be ruined. Rod smiled coldly, already showing his true colors. Russell played another recording. This one's from 2 hours ago. Charlene again. I need money, Jack. Just enough to get by until I can figure this out. Jack, Charlene, I'm barely keeping my own head above water. Maybe you should consider going back to Rod, trying to work things out. Go back to Rod. After what we've done. Are you insane? I'm being practical. You married him for security. Maybe it's time to remember why. Rod's expression darkened. So Jack's ready to throw her away the moment she becomes inconvenient. Gets better, Russell said, queuing up another file. This is from 30 minutes ago. Jack's voice was cold, calculating. Look, Charlene, I care about you, but I can't destroy my life for this relationship. Rod's obviously planning something, and I'm not going down with you. Charlene's response was desperate. So you're just abandoning me? After 3 years. I'm protecting myself. Maybe you should have thought about consequences before you started playing games with a man like Rod Gilmore. Rod leaned back in his chair. Perfect. They're already turning on each other. That's not all, Russell said. Jack's been making inquiries about transferring to Morrison's European division. He's trying to flee the country. Not going to happen. Rod opened a different file on his laptop. Morrison's CEO is Colonel James Prince, retired Army. He and I served together in Afghanistan. I called him this afternoon. And James is very interested in learning about Jack's expense account irregularities and his relationship with a client's wife. Turns out Morrison has a strict ethics policy about employee conduct. Russell whistled. Jack's going to be fired. Jack's going to be destroyed. But not until I'm finished with him. Rod stood and walked to the wall covered with surveillance photos. Pictures of Jack's apartment, his office, his regular haunts. Pictures of Charlene entering hotels, restaurants, meeting Jack at various locations. Russell, I need you to arrange something for me. Tonight's meeting between Jack and Charlene. I want them to know they're being watched. How? Stage a confrontation. Make it obvious you're following them, taking pictures. Let them see you. Russell frowned. That could compromise the operation. That's the point. I want them paranoid, scared, making desperate decisions. What kind of decisions? Rod turned back to face the investigator. The kind that will give me legal justification for what I'm planning to do to them. Rod's phone rang. The caller ID showed Wade's number. Wade. Rod, we need to talk. Something's happened. What kind of something? Tyler called me. He's been getting calls at his law firm. Someone's been asking questions about his character, his involvement in family disputes, his trustworthiness. Rod smiled coldly. Really? How unfortunate. Rod, did I what? Exercise my right to provide honest references when potential employers ask about someone's character? You're destroying his career. Tyler destroyed his own career when he chose to betray his father. Wade's voice was strained. Rod, this has to stop. You're crossing lines that you can't uncross. The lines were crossed 3 years ago when my wife started fucking another man and my children decided to help her do it. They're your kids, Rod. Your blood. Blood means nothing without loyalty. My children prove they have no loyalty to me. What about Brittany? What have you done to her? Rod's smile widened. Brittany's startup was supposed to receive series of funding next week. Unfortunately, potential investors have been receiving some very concerning information about the company's marketing coordinator. You bastard. Careful, Wade. You're starting to sound like someone who sided with my enemies. The line went quiet for a long moment. Wade, are you still there? I'm here. Rod, I need to ask you something directly. Are you planning to hurt anyone physically? That depends on what they do next. That's not an answer. Rod's voice went cold. Wade, let me be very clear about something. I am going to destroy everyone who betrayed me. I'm going to ruin their careers, their finances, their reputations, and their futures. If they try to run, I'll find them. If they try to fight back, I'll crush them. And if they try to hurt me or interfere with my plans, then yes, I will hurt them physically. Rod, I'm not finished. My wife, my children, my sister, my attorney, all of them chose to betray me. They chose to participate in my humiliation. They chose to protect my enemies instead of protecting me. Now they get to live with the consequences. Wade's voice was barely above a whisper. What about me, Rod? What are my consequences going to be? Rod considered the question carefully. That depends, Wade. Are you going to help me, or are you going to get in my way? And if I try to stop you? Rod's laugh was like breaking glass. Then you'll learn why I never lost a war. The line went dead, leaving Rod alone with Russell and the surveillance equipment that would help him destroy the people who destroyed his life. Tomorrow, Phase 4 would begin. Tomorrow, his enemies would start paying the price for betraying Rod Gilmore. And Rod had learned long ago that mercy was a luxury that got good soldiers killed. Chapter 7. The Perfect Storm. The surveillance footage from Jack's apartment played on Rod's laptop screen like a dark theater production. Russell Mansfield manipulated the controls, occasionally pointing out audio cues or technical details, while Rod watched his wife and her lover destroy each other. Camera 3 has the best angle of the living room, Russell explained. Camera 1 covers the kitchen and dining area. Audio quality, Rod asked, his attention focused entirely on the screen. Crystal clear. The directional microphones pick up everything. On screen, Jack paced nervously around his apartment, checking his appearance in the mirror and adjusting furniture. The timestamp showed 7:42 p.m., 12 minutes after Charlene was supposed to arrive. She's late, Rod observed. She's making him wait. Psychological warfare. At 7:47 p.m., the apartment's doorbell rang. Jack smoothed his hair once more and answered the door. Charlene entered wearing a black dress that Rod recognized. He'd bought it for her last anniversary. Now it looked wrinkled, desperate. Sorry I'm late, Charlene said, her voice strained. I had to walk. I can't afford a taxi anymore. Jack's face showed irritation rather than sympathy. We need to talk. I know. That's why I'm here. They sat on opposite ends of Jack's couch, a telling detail. The intimacy that had once characterized their relationship was gone, replaced by tension and mutual resentment. Charlene, this isn't working, Jack said without preamble. Rod's declared war on both of us, and I can't afford to be collateral damage. So what are you saying? I'm saying maybe we should end this. Let things cool down. See if Rod will negotiate once his anger passes. Charlene's laugh was bitter. You don't know Rod. His anger doesn't pass. It calculates. Then we need to be smart about this. Smart. Charlene's voice rose. Smart would have been not getting caught. Smart would have been not falling in love with someone who runs at the first sign of trouble. Jack stood and walked to his window. I'm not running. I'm being practical. You're being a coward. And you're being naive if you think Rod's going to just let this go. He's systematically destroying our lives, Charlene. My boss called me into his office today. Someone's been asking questions about my expense reports. What kind of questions? The kind that could get me fired. The kind that could get me arrested. Charlene paled. Rod wouldn't. Rod would do anything. And he is doing anything. My apartment's being watched. My phone's probably tapped. Someone followed me to lunch today and took pictures. Rod leaned forward. This was exactly what he'd hoped for. Are you sure? Charlene asked. Dead sure. Professional surveillance. Military precision. Jack turned back to face her. Your husband's not just angry, Charlene. He's dangerous. So what do you want me to do? I want you to go back to him. Apologize. Beg forgiveness. Whatever it takes to call off his dogs. Charlene stared at Jack in disbelief. You want me to go back to Rod and pretend the last 3 years didn't happen? I want you to save both our asses before he destroys us completely. And what about us? What about our relationship? Jack's hesitation spoke volumes. Maybe our relationship was a mistake. The words hit Charlene like a physical blow. A mistake? 3 years of my life was a mistake. 3 years of incredible sex and emotional connection that we both knew couldn't last forever. Jack clarified with brutal honesty. Get out, Charlene said quietly. What? Get out. Leave your own apartment if you have to, but get away from me before I do something we'll both regret. Jack grabbed his keys and headed for the door. Charlene, be smart about this. Rod's offering you a way back. Take it. Rod hasn't offered me anything. He will. Men like Rod always offer terms before they go nuclear. When he does, take the deal. Jack left, slamming the door behind him. Charlene sat alone on the couch, crying into her hands. Rod smiled coldly. Perfect. Now for phase 2. Russell looked up from his equipment. Phase 2. Charlene's going to get desperate now. Desperate enough to do something stupid. Rod pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Blake? It's Rod. I need you to call Charlene tonight. Tell her I'm willing to discuss terms for reconciliation. Rod, are you serious about reconciling? I'm serious about giving her enough rope to hang herself. Tell her to meet me tomorrow night at the Fairmont Hotel, the presidential suite. Tell her if she comes alone and unarmed, we can talk about saving our marriage. And if she doesn't come alone, then she'll have made her final mistake. Rod ended the call and turned back to Russell. How long to set up surveillance in the presidential suite? 6 hours, minimum. But Rod, what if she actually wants to reconcile? What if she's genuinely sorry? Rod's expression was stone cold. Then she should have been sorry 3 years ago. It's too late for sorry now. What are you planning? I'm planning to record her confession. I want to hear her admit to the affair, admit to stealing my money, admit to using me while she fucked another man. I want it all on tape. And then I'm going to show that tape to everyone she cares about. Her sister, her friends, our children, our neighbors. I want the entire world to know what kind of woman Charlene Gilmore really is. Russell looked uncomfortable. Rod, that's pretty brutal. Brutal? Rod's voice was dangerously quiet. She spent 3 years brutally destroying my life. She brutally humiliated me in front of my family and community. She brutally betrayed every vow we ever made. Now she gets to experience the consequences of brutal choices. Rod's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it, and his expression darkened further. What is it? Russell asked. Wait. He's threatening to call the police if I don't stop my harassment campaign against Jack and Charlene. Are you going to stop? Rod looked up from his phone, and Russell saw something in his eyes that made him step back involuntarily. Wade just joined my list of enemies, Rod said quietly. I've been very patient with people who betrayed me. That patience is about to end. What does that mean? Rod stood and walked to his wall of surveillance photos. He selected one picture and held it up. Wade leaving a restaurant with a woman who wasn't his wife. Wade's been having his own affair for the past 6 months. With his secretary, Kelly Gross. His wife, Linda, doesn't know. Russell stared at the photograph. How did you? I've been investigating everyone who knew about Charlene's affair and kept it secret. Turns out, people who help others keep secrets usually have secrets of their own. What are you going to do with this? Rod picked up his phone and began typing a text message. I'm going to give Wade a choice. He can stop interfering with my operations, or his wife can learn about his secretary. His call. Rod, this is getting out of hand. No, Rod interrupted. This is getting under control. For 3 years, everyone around me has been playing games, keeping secrets, manipulating information. Now I'm the one with the information. Now I'm the one with the power. Now I'm the one making the rules. Rod sent the text and smiled coldly. Tomorrow night, Charlene's going to walk into the presidential suite thinking she can manipulate me one more time. She's going to confess everything, thinking her tears and apologies will save her. And instead, she's going to discover that Rod Gilmore doesn't forgive. Rod Gilmore doesn't forget. And Rod Gilmore always gets his revenge. Chapter 8. Scorched Earth. Rod stood in the presidential suite of the Fairmont Hotel, checking the surveillance equipment Russell had installed. Hidden cameras covered every angle, directional microphones captured every whisper, and recording devices would preserve every word of the conversation he was about to have with his wife. Everything's operational, Russell confirmed, speaking through Rod's earpiece. Audio and video feeds are crystal clear. Rod wore a perfectly tailored suit, the same one he'd worn to their wedding 28 years ago. He wanted Charlene to remember what she'd thrown away. At exactly 8 p.m., there was a soft knock on the door. Rod opened it to find Charlene standing in the hallway, wearing the emerald dress he'd bought her for their 20th anniversary. She looked beautiful, desperate, and completely unaware that she was walking into a trap. "Hello, Rod," she said softly. "Charlene, come in." She entered the suite, her eyes taking in the elegant furnishings, the champagne chilling in an ice bucket, the romantic lighting Rod had arranged. Her face showed hope for the first time in days. "Blake said you wanted to talk about reconciliation," she said, settling onto the couch. Rod poured 2 glasses of champagne and handed her one. "I wanted to talk about the truth. The truth. The truth about our marriage. The truth about your affair. The truth about what happens next." Charlene took a sip of champagne, her hands trembling slightly. "Rod, I know I've hurt you. I know I've made terrible mistakes. But I want to fix this. I want to save our marriage." "Do you?" Rod remained standing, studying her like a specimen under a microscope. "Tell me why." "Because I love you. Because 28 years means something. Because we have children together, a life together. Or because Jack Denton abandoned you the moment things got difficult?" Charlene's face flushed. "That's not why, isn't it? Tell me, Charlene, what did Jack say when you told him I'd frozen our accounts? Was he supportive? Did he offer to take care of you?" Her silence was answer enough. Rod sat across from her, his posture relaxed but his eyes predatory. "Let me tell you what Jack said. He said your relationship was a mistake. He said you should come back to me and beg forgiveness. He said he couldn't afford to be collateral damage in my war against you." Charlene stared at him. "How do you know what Jack said?" "Because I've been watching you, Charlene. Listening to your conversations, tracking your movements, documenting your betrayal. I know everything. You've been spying on me. I've been gathering intelligence on my enemies." Rod's voice was matter of fact. "Did you really think I'd discover your affair and just accept it? Did you think I'd let you humiliate me without consequences?" Charlene set down her champagne glass with shaking hands. "Rod, what do you want from me?" "I want the truth. All of it. Start from the beginning." "What beginning?" "The beginning of your affair with Jack Denton. When it started, how it developed, every detail of how you betrayed our marriage." Charlene looked around the suite as if searching for escape routes. "Why do you need to hear this?" "Because I want to understand exactly what kind of woman I married. I want to know if there was ever a real moment between us, or if our entire marriage was as fake as your fidelity." "Our marriage wasn't fake." "Prove it. Tell me the truth about Jack." Charlene took a deep breath, her decision made. "It started 3 years ago at our college reunion. Jack was there, recently divorced, charming, attentive. He made me feel young again, desired." "Go on." "We exchanged numbers. Started texting, then calling. It was innocent at first, just catching up on old times." "When did it become physical?" "About 6 months later. Jack was in town for business. We met for lunch, and it just happened." Rod's expression remained neutral, but inside he was recording every word. "Where?" "The Westin. Room 412. "How often did you meet?" "Once or twice a month at first. Then more frequently. Eventually, we were seeing each other 2 or 3 times a week. Using my money to pay for hotels." Charlene's voice dropped to a whisper. "Yes. And you enjoyed it. The lying, the betrayal, the risk of destroying our family. I enjoyed feeling alive again, Rod. I enjoyed being with someone who made me feel special, instead of the husband who worked 18-hour days to provide you with the lifestyle you demanded. You were never here, Rod. Even when you were physically present, you were thinking about work, about contracts, about everything except me. Rod leaned forward. So you decided to find someone who would pay attention to you. I decided to find someone who made me happy. And our children? When they discovered your affair, how did that make you feel? Charlene began crying. Horrible. Ashamed. But I was in too deep to stop. Too deep, or too selfish? Both. I was selfish, Rod. I was weak and selfish, and I destroyed everything good in my life for a few moments of feeling special. Rod stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. What did you tell Jack about me? What do you mean? Did you tell him I was a bad husband? Did you complain about our marriage? Did you share intimate details about our life together? Sometimes, when I was angry or frustrated. What kinds of details? Charlene's voice was barely audible. Everything. Our finances, our business, our personal problems. I told him everything. Rod turned back to face her. Including my military background, my business strategies, my plans for the future. Yes. So you gave our family's enemy a complete intelligence briefing on how to destroy me. Jack isn't our enemy. Jack is a man who spent 3 years fucking my wife while gathering information about my weaknesses. That's the definition of an enemy. Rod sat back down, his voice becoming conversational. Tell me about the money, Charlene. What money? The $22,000 you transferred from our joint account to your secret account. The money you used to fund your affair. How did you? I told you. I know everything. Tell me about the money. I needed it for expenses. Hotels, dinners, gifts for Jack. Gifts. His birthday, Christmas, Valentine's Day. I bought him a watch, some clothes, helped with his car payments when he was struggling. Rod's laugh was like breaking glass. You used my money to buy gifts for the man who was fucking you behind my back. Rod, please. Did it occur to you that you were stealing from me? That every dollar you spent on Jack was a dollar stolen from our family's future? I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking very clearly. You were thinking about how to have your affair while maintaining your comfortable lifestyle. You were thinking about how to betray me without losing your security. Charlene stood abruptly. What do you want from me, Rod? I've admitted everything. I've confessed my mistakes. What more do you want? Rod looked at her for a long moment, memorizing every detail of her face. I want you to understand that there are no second chances, Charlene. No forgiveness. No reconciliation. What do you mean? I mean our marriage is over. Not because of your affair, but because of your character. You're not the woman I thought I married. You're not worthy of forgiveness. Rod, please. We can work through this. We can't work through anything. You made your choice. You chose Jack over me, chose lies over truth, chose betrayal over loyalty. Now you get to live with the consequences. Charlene sank back onto the couch. What consequences? Rod picked up his phone and pressed a button. The suite's television screen activated, showing surveillance footage of Charlene and Jack in various hotels, restaurants, and compromising situations. This footage, along with audio recordings of your confession tonight, will be sent to everyone who matters to you. Your sister, your friends, our neighbors, your employer. Everyone will know exactly what kind of woman you are. Rod, you can't. I can do whatever I want. You no longer have any say in my decisions. Rod pressed another button. The screen showed financial records documenting Charlene's theft. This information will be provided to the IRS, the police, and our divorce attorney. You'll be charged with theft, fraud, and tax evasion. Rod, please stop. I'm not finished. Rod's voice was completely emotionless. Tyler and Brittany have already lost their positions. Tyler's law firm decided he wasn't partnership material after learning about his involvement in family conspiracy. Brittany's startup lost their funding when investors learned about their marketing coordinator's ethical problems. Charlene stood, her face white with shock. You destroyed our children's careers? Our children destroyed their own careers when they chose to betray their father. They're your blood, Rod. Blood means nothing without loyalty. Our children prove they have no loyalty to me. Charlene rushed toward the door, but Rod's voice stopped her. Charlene. She turned back, tears streaming down her face. Jack Denon was fired from Morrison Labs this afternoon. He's also being charged with embezzlement and corporate espionage. His apartment lease has been terminated, his credit cards canceled, and his reputation destroyed. The man you chose over me no longer exists. Why are you telling me this? Rod's smile was the most terrifying thing she'd ever seen. Because I want you to understand that crossing Rod Gilmore comes with a price that no one can afford to pay. Charlene fled the suite, leaving Rod alone with the surveillance equipment and the complete recording of her confession. Tomorrow, everyone who had betrayed him would receive their copies of tonight's conversation. Tomorrow, the final phase of his revenge would begin. Rod Gilmore had spent 3 years being the victim. Starting tomorrow, he would be the victor. Chapter 9. Ashes and Retribution. 6 months later, Rod Gilmore sat in his new office overlooking Puget Sound, reviewing the final reports on what the media had dubbed the Gilmore Revenge. The newspapers had covered every detail of his systematic destruction of everyone who had betrayed him. Blake Parsons entered the office carrying a thick folder. The attorney looked years older than when Rod had first confronted him, but he'd proven useful during the cleanup phase. The final divorce decree is signed, Blake announced, setting the papers on Rod's desk. Charlene gets nothing. The court agreed that her adultery and theft voided any claim to your assets. Rod glanced at the documents without emotion. Where is she now? Working as a cashier at a grocery store in Tacoma. She's living in a studio apartment, can barely afford rent. The criminal charges for theft and fraud are still pending. And Jack, deported back to Canada after his visa was revoked. He's facing extradition requests for the Morrison Labs espionage case. His life is effectively over. Rod nodded, satisfied. Jack Denon had learned the hard way that stealing another man's wife came with consequences he couldn't afford to pay. Tyler and Brittany. Blake's expression became uncomfortable. Tyler's working as a public defender in Alaska. It was the only job he could find after the character assassination campaign. Brittany's unemployed, living with friends in Portland. They made their choices, Rod said without emotion. Adults face adult consequences. Rod, they're your children. They were my children when they chose to betray me. Now they're strangers who share my DNA. Blake set down another document. Wade Stokes has been trying to reach you. He says it's important. Rod's expression darkened. Wade had tried to interfere with his revenge campaign, threatened to call the police, attempted to protect the people who had betrayed Rod. For that, Wade had paid his own price. Wade's wife Linda left him when she learned about his affair with his secretary. He lost half his assets in the divorce, including his stake in our company. He's not in a position to make demands. He says he has information about Charlene that you need to know. There's nothing about Charlene I need to know. She's been neutralized as a threat. Blake hesitated. Rod, there's something else. Your sister Gloria has been hospitalized. This got Rod's attention. What happened? Depression. Severe depression. She blames herself for not telling you about Charlene's affair sooner. She attempted suicide last week. Rod felt a flicker of emotion, quickly suppressed. Gloria had made her choice when she chose to protect Charlene's secret instead of protecting her brother. Is she stable? Physically, yes. Mentally, she's devastated. She wants to see you. No. Rod. I said no. Gloria chose sides in this war. She chose wrong. She can live with the consequences. Blake gathered his papers, clearly disturbed by Rod's coldness. Rod, you've won. You've destroyed everyone who hurt you. Maybe it's time to consider whether victory is worth the cost. Rod turned to face his attorney. Blake, let me explain something to you. For 3 years, I was weak. I trusted people who were lying to me. I loved people who were betraying me. I protected people who were plotting against me. That weakness almost destroyed me. And now I'm strong. Now no one can lie to me without consequences. Now no one can betray me without being destroyed. Now no one can plot against me without facing total war. Blake stood to leave. And is that enough? Is being feared the same as being happy? Rod looked out his window at the Seattle skyline, considering the question. Happiness is temporary. Respect is permanent. Fear is absolute. After Blake left, Rod sat alone in his office, surrounded by the evidence of his complete victory. Framed articles covered the walls. Newspaper stories about Charlene's affair and theft, Jack's corporate espionage conviction, Tyler's professional downfall, Brittany's financial ruin. His phone buzzed with a message from Russell Mansfield. Final surveillance report attached. All targets neutralized. Mission complete. Rod opened the report, scanning the details of his enemy's current situations. Charlene, working for minimum wage and facing criminal prosecution. Jack, fighting extradition from a cramped apartment in Montreal. Tyler, defending criminals in Anchorage for a fraction of his former salary. Brittany, unemployed and surviving on food stamps. Wade was working as a security guard at a shopping mall, his marriage destroyed, his reputation ruined, his future prospects non-existent. Gloria remained hospitalized, sedated, and under suicide watch. Blake had asked if victory was worth the cost. Rod considered the question seriously. He'd lost his wife, his children, his sister, his best friend. He'd destroyed every relationship that had once mattered to him. But he'd also ensured that no one would ever betray him again. He'd demonstrated that crossing Rod Gilmore came with a price no one could afford to pay. He'd achieved total victory over his enemies. His company now employed 300 people and held contracts worth over $100 million. His personal wealth had doubled during the revenge campaign, as he'd focused entirely on business success. His reputation in the corporate world was fearsome. No one dared to cross him, steal from him, or lie to him. Rod opened his desk drawer and pulled out a single photograph, the last picture of his family together, taken at Tyler's law school graduation 3 years ago. Everyone was smiling, happy, unaware that Charlene's affair had already begun. He studied each face in the photograph. Charlene, beautiful and deceptive. Tyler, ambitious and treacherous. Brittany, carefree and disloyal. Wade, trusted and false. Gloria, loving and weak. Every person in that photograph had betrayed him. Every person had chosen to protect his enemies instead of protecting him. Every person had received exactly what they deserved. Rod placed the photograph back in the drawer and closed it firmly. The past was finished. The future belonged to those strong enough to take it. His phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Rod Gilmore. Mr. Gilmore, this is Dr. Sarah Martinez from Seattle General Hospital. Your sister Gloria has been asking for you. She's in critical condition. Rod looked out at the Seattle skyline, considering his response. Gloria had made her choice when she chose to protect Charlene's secret. Actions had consequences. Mr. Gilmore? Are you there? I'm here. Tell my sister that Rod Gilmore doesn't forgive betrayal. Tell her that Rod Gilmore doesn't forget disloyalty. Tell her that she chose her side in this war, and now she has to live with the consequences. Sir, she's dying. She died to me the moment she chose to protect my wife's affair instead of protecting her brother. Rod ended the call and returned to his work. Outside his window, Seattle bustled with life and activity, unaware that one of its most successful citizens had just refused to visit his dying sister. Rod Gilmore had learned the most important lesson of his life. Mercy was a luxury that got good soldiers killed. He'd shown mercy to his enemies for 3 years, trusted them, loved them, protected them. Never again. Rod picked up his next contract proposal and began reading. He had a business to run, an empire to build, and enemies to keep at bay. The war was over. Rod Gilmore had won, and winners never apologized for victory.